This morning I would like to go to Debka Weekly and issue number 798. And first of all, before I get started, if you'd like to, I don't in any way get paid for any of my YouTube videos. If somebody would offer me payment, I would not accept it. But I think it would be a good idea to subscribe to Debka Weekly, because you can get a lot more information there than you can in any news site when it concerns the Middle East. This particular article is so important, I need to go ahead and read it. And in light of the warming of relations between North Korea and South Korea, and the underlying reason behind it is, well, how do I put this? The mountain that they've been doing nuclear tests in North Korea on has collapsed. And of course, that's going to send off all kinds of nuclear fallout into the air near China, near Russia, or in China and Russia. And apparently China has called Kim Jong-un to Beijing, and we don't know what they discussed, but when he came back home, when Kim Jong-un came back home, this change of heart, so to speak, came over him. And folks, I only have one thing to say about this whole thing with North Korea, really. So I'm going to go ahead and read this article in Debka Weekly. The title is Trump Middle East Plan to be Unveiled with U.S. Embassy Move. Now, folks, remember what Paul told the Thessalonians when they shall say peace. Now, they have said peace many, 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 many times. And every time a peace initiative is set in motion in the Middle East, war breaks out. You can look it up. There's a long history of that. And so there's going to be one peace initiative that's going to be the one that triggers the all-out war, the all-out destruction in the time of Jehovah's wrath to come. Which one is it? How do we know? I will read this and we'll discuss it. U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered senior advisor Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt, his special representative for international negotiations, to tie up the last ends, or the loose ends, of his administration's Israeli-Palestinian peace plan. The full text must be ready 2 weeks before the ceremonial inauguration of the U.S. Embassy at its Jerusalem compound, he said. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and wife will head the 250-strong U.S. official delegation to the event. Newly confirmed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is also considered to make an appearance at the event. Debka Weekly's Washington and Jerusalem sources reporting this add that the last month, President Trump set in motion the process for unveiling his peace plan at the same time as the U.S. Embassy inauguration in May 14th. He broached the plan last month in his White House talks with the visiting Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and in phone conversations with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi He also asked Turkish President Erdogan to come aboard, but was rebuffed. These feelers yielded broad consensus on the following points. The Trump peace plan will be released as planned, regardless of its rejection by Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas and the entire Palestinian leadership. The Arab world is also expected to publicly nix the blueprint, while keeping it afloat by offering to make its acceptable elements the basis for further discussions on an eventual peace deal between the Palestinians and Israel. The White House, Egypt, and Gulf nations agreed to headhunt Palestinian figures living outside the PA domain who hold different views from the Ramallah elite and would be willing to underwrite the plan. 5 eminent Palestinians have been found as possible candidates. The Israeli Prime Minister will issue a cautious statement proposing to use the Trump plan as a springboard for immediate negotiations with Arab governments on disputed points. Administration envoys have buttonholed a wide range of Israeli political leaders, both in the government coalition and on opposition benches to stave off domestic ructions when Netanyahu approves the Trump plan. That's a bit presumptuous, don't you think? When Netanyahu approves the Trump plan? Well, we'll look at the Trump plan here in just a minute. The fate of the blueprint will be handled exclusively by Kushner and Greenblatt. Sources who have perused the text report it addresses the subjects at issue in detail, including Jerusalem. Debka Weekly quotes these sources as revealing the following nuggets. A Palestinian state will be established with limited sovereignty across about half of Judea and Samaria. I won't say West Bank in my speech. It is an abomination, folks. And all the Gaza Strip. Israel will retain security responsibilities for most of the West Bank and the border crossings, as well as jurisdiction and military presence in the Jordan Valley. The Arab neighborhoods of East Jerusalem will be relegated to the Palestinian state, except for the Old City, which will be part of Israeli Jerusalem. Palestine and Jordan will share religious jurisdiction over the city's mosques. Abu Dis, east of Jerusalem, is the proposed capital of Palestine. Gaza will be integrated into the new state if Hamas agrees to be disarmed. There is no provision in the plan for the Palestinian refugees' right of return, only the creation of a compensation mechanism to be managed by the international community. The Trump plan mandates Israel's recognition as the homeland of the Jewish people and Palestine with limited sovereignty as the Palestinian homeland. You want to know my opinion of this? It's an abomination. No country would ever agree to such a thing. And no country should. That would be like Canada grabbing parts of Washington, D.C. because a certain amount of Canadians live in Washington, D.C. So this deal, this Trump peace plan, is being called by the Trump administration the ultimate peace plan. Ultimate. And let us understand our history, or the world history, concerning all of these so-called peace deals from back in the day. I will go to, what is it, FP. This article is by Yuri Friedman, February 27, 2012. The Peace Process, A Short History. Chronicling Israel and Palestine's path to become a catchphrase. With the Israeli-Palestinian conflict arguably no closer to being resolved than it was a decade ago, one has to wonder, has the much vaunted peace process hailed by U.S. presidents from both parties become a charade? Well, we all know the answer to that now, don't we? The phrase's long history suggests that there has been a lot more process than peace. Ain't that the truth? Now, as Arab uprisings transform the Middle East and Israeli and Palestinians go their separate ways, it may be time to pick up a new buzzword: stalemate. 1967, after the Six-Day War, UN Security Council Resolution 242 calls for Israel to withdraw from occupied territories. It should be territories that were won by war, but they called it occupied territories. Please note that no territory gained by the Europeans in war has ever been called occupied territories, and that includes the United States. In exchange for the end of hostilities and respect for the sovereignty of all states in the area, the imprecise language neuters the resolution, but the land for peace formula will inform or haunt peace efforts thereafter. 1973. Notice in each of these cases, 1967 and 1973 was after Israel won each war. And of course the nations would come to try to undermine Israel's victory. Now, the coming war, the nations will also, once again, try to undermine Israel's victory. Keep that in the back of your mind. Now, 1973, Egypt and Syria launched coordinated surprise attacks on Israel and Sinai and in the Golan Heights on Yom Kippur. The U.S.-Soviet brinksmanship over the war and the Soviet oil embargo, or the Arab oil embargo, highlights the conflict's geopolitical dimensions, and the United States devotes more diplomatic muscle to resolving it. 1973 through 1975 is what the media dubs the shuttle diplomacy. U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger holds bilateral talks with the Yom Kippur War belligerents, helping defuse the immediate crisis. Kissinger and his advisors refer to these diplomatic efforts as a negotiating process, and then, as the political climate in the region defrosts, a peace process. The process stalls as U.S. President Richard Nixon resigns and Six-Day War hero Yitzhak Rabin assumes power in Israel. Now, I'm not inferring that this will happen again, but to those in Washington, D.C., you might want to take a look at this particular episode in during the Nixon administration and what happened to him. 1974, Arab leaders recognized the Palestinian Liberation Organization as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, transforming the Palestinian question from one of refugee rights into one of nationalist aspirations. I have come bearing an olive branch and a freedom fighter's gun, PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat informs the UN General Assembly a month later. Do not let the olive branch fall from my hand. 1975, an influential Brookings Institute study breaks with Kissinger's incremental peace process, advocating a comprehensive Arab-Israeli settlement that would include Israel withdrawing to roughly its pre-1967 borders in support of Palestinian self-determination in return for diplomatic recognition and peace with its Arab neighbors. 1977, U.S. President Jimmy Carter brings several authors of the Brookings Report into his administration and resolves to pursue a more ambitious peace process, surprising even his closest advisors by openly calling for a Palestinian homeland. Israel's Menachem Begin and Egypt's Anwar Sadat expresses an appetite for peace, and Sadat becomes the first Arab leader to visit Israel. And incidentally, folks, Jimmy Carter now is being accused of aiding and abetting terrorists. You can Google it up for yourself. That headline came a couple of days ago. (1978 through 1979), Sadat and Begin meet with Carter, producing the Camp David Accords, and a year later, an Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty in which Egypt recognized Israel and Israel withdraws from Sinai. The treaty invites Israel's other neighbors to join the peace process with Israel. No takers. Of course not. See, this peace process was designed to chip away at Israeli territory until there is none left, if you want to know the truth. It always seems to go back to the 67 borders. 1978, 1979, let's see, let's go to 1982. After Sadat's assassination and Israeli attacks on the PLO in Lebanon, U.S. President Ronald Reagan calls for a fresh start, urging Jordan to work with the Palestinians to achieve self-government. The goal goes unrealized. 1985, Dennis Ross, who advised 5 U.S. presidents in the Middle East, argues that the United States should cautiously facilitate diplomacy in the region while patiently awaiting real movements from local parties. 1987, Sheikh Ahmad Yassin founds Hamas amid the eruption of the first Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli control of the West Bank and Gaza, Samaria and Gaza. Please, folks. The group's 1988 charter calls for Israel's destruction and the creation of an Islamist Palestinian state through violent jihad. 1991, emboldened by success in the Gulf War, U.S. President George H.W. Bush co-sponsors with the Soviet Union a conference in Madrid between Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the Palestinians, who meet with Israeli negotiators for the first time. The dialogue achieves little, but it creates a long-missing framework for talks. Secret Israeli, or 1993 to 1994, secret Israeli PLO talks in Norway yield the first deal between the two sides, the Oslo Accords. They recognize one another and chart a 5-year plan for Israel to code or cede control of the territories of the new Palestinian Authority and Palestinian leaders to crack down on terrorism before final peace agreement. Rabin and Jordan's King Hussein signed another peace treaty a year later. 1995, Jewish extremist Yigal Amir assassinates Rabin, who is in his second term, had become a strong advocate for its two-state solution. The Oslo peace process sputters. Now, one thing that I have noticed, before I continue with this, is that people who, no matter who they are, whether it be Richard Nixon, Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, or Yitzhak Rabin, it seems there is a pattern of their political career being cut short when they step too far on the wrong side. I will continue. Year 2000, U.S. President Bill Clinton convenes Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak at Camp David to address Oslo's thorniest issues, border security, settlements, refugees in Jerusalem. But the talks collapse and the Second Intifada explodes in violence. And so what this year 2000 episode begins to reveal is that every time from that point on, it seems like whenever peace is discussed between the Israelis and the Palestinians, war breaks out. The Palestinians want to have no part in making peace with Israel. The year 2001, a May report by former U.S. Senator George Mitchell warns that the greatest danger in the Middle East is that the culture of peace nurtured over the previous decade is being shattered. Yeah. My point well made. After the 9/11 attacks, President George W. Bush makes no mention of the peace process in his 2002 State of the Union address. 2002 through 2003, as the United States builds a coalition to go to war in Iraq, Bush becomes the first president to call explicitly for an independent Palestinian state. The Saudis present an Arab League-endorsed peace plan, and the so-called Quartet, United States, European Union, Russia, and the United Nations unveil a roadmap for peace that puts security ahead of a political agreement. And one thing that I do want to say is, it is this Iraq war that President George W. Bush initiated that strengthened Iran's hand in the Middle East by flipping Iraq to being Sunni controlled to being Shiite controlled, which is why now Syria is being run, operated, and controlled by Iran today. The mischief that was caused by the Iraq War has now been realized today and will be partly responsible for this war that's going to break out between Iran and Israel shortly. The Saudis present an Arab League-endorsed peace plan, and the so-called Quartet, the United States, European Union, Russia, and the United Nations unveils a roadmap for peace that puts security ahead of a political agreement. 2007, with pessimism reaching new depths, the peace process has no close, writes Middle East analyst Nathan J. Brown. Bush hosts a conference in Annapolis between Israel and its Arab neighbors that enshrines a two-state solution. And the Bush patriarch, Prescott Bush, you might want to Google his dealings with Adolf Hitler. Hamas, which has seized power in Gaza and split with its rival Palestinian faction, Fatah, is not invited. 2008, an Israeli military offensive in Gaza wipes out dialogue between Israel's Ehud Olmert and the Palestinian Authority's Mahmoud Abbas. 2009 through 2010, U.S. President Barack Obama enters office promising to actively and aggressively seek a lasting peace after securing a hard-won 10-month settlement freeze from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Obama hosts face-to-face talks but fails to obtain substantive concessions. And, of course, that source is from Gallup, I guess. 2011 to 2012, Obama enrages Netanyahu by proposing that new negotiations start from pre-67 borders with land swaps while the Palestinians pursue statehood at the United Nations in lieu of talks. As 2012 begins, Mideast negotiator Ross recalls what Israeli official Dan Meridor once told him: the peace process is like riding a bicycle. When you stop pedaling, you fall off. The Israelis and Palestinians, Ross said, have stopped pedaling. And this source is Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research. So now we have the ultimate deal coming from the Trump administration that's going to essentially give much of East Jerusalem to the Palestinians, to the Arabs, but the old city goes to Israel. This is not a peace deal. This is a war deal. And they plan on doing this on May the 14th. And as I remember, in fact, I'll go find an article to prove my point. Oh, I don't know if I will be able to find it. I will try and read a couple of articles here, and while I'm doing so, I want to point out right now that Donald Trump said that Israel is going to have to give up some things for the UN or the U.S. embassy move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And now we know, if Debka File or if Debka Weekly is correct, now we know what those concessions are. To give up East Jerusalem, however, the Palestinian so-called capital would be east of East Jerusalem. Israel would keep the old city, but East Jerusalem would go to the Fakestinians. Now, Huffington Post. Now that's a real website to be reading from, huh? Let's see here. It says, here's why the U.S. should move its embassy to Jerusalem. This is from Jeff Charles. I don't know if I will go down part ways into this article where it says, a powerful message to Israel's enemies. Ever since the State of Israel was founded in 1948, it has been surrounded by enemies. After the refugee crisis began, Palestinians, with the help of Iran, Iraq, and other nations, have resorted to terrorism to push the Jewish state to give concessions. However, the Palestinians have repeatedly rejected Israel's overtures for peace. Israel's enemies do not respond to concessions. Each time Israel has given up land, listen very carefully, Trump administration. Each time Israel has given up land, they were met with more violence. When Israel, under the leadership of Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, withdrew from the Gaza Strip, the Palestinians responded by putting Hamas, a radical Islamic terror group, in power. Thousands of Israelis were evicted from their homes, and Palestinians rewarded them with more violence. You get what I'm saying here, folks? This new ultimate peace deal is going to lead to the ultimate violence. Okay, see if there's another. I think that should be enough. Okay, wait a minute. Here we go. This is what I was looking for, folks. Timesofisrael.com, January 25th, 2018. Abdullah, U.S. must get a major Israeli concession after Jerusalem recognition. In Davos, Switzerland, Jordan King Abdullah II said Thursday that the U.S. now faces the challenge of getting Israel to make a significant concession in exchange for its recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital in order to get the peace process back on track. The challenge that the Americans have with the Israelis is that this Jerusalem recognition is to make any sense, it's to give something pretty good to the Palestinians, he told CNN's Fareed Zakaria during an open interview session at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Abdullah gave the response upon being asked whether Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu truly believed in the two-state solution. He had his skepticism, he said, but he would reserve judgment until after U.S. President Donald Trump presents his peace plan. Trump had hinted that the move would require something big in return from Israel, saying in a cryptic tweet that Israel for that would have to pay more. And so I'm going to quote Donald Trump's Twitter statement. It's not only Pakistan that we pay billions of dollars to for nothing, but also many other countries and others. As an example, we pay the Palestinians hundreds of millions of dollars a year and get no appreciation or respect. They don't even want to negotiate a long overdue peace treaty with Israel. We have taken Jerusalem, meaning taken Jerusalem out of the equation. Well, apparently not. The toughest part of the negotiation off the table. But Israel for that would have to pay more. But with the Palestinians no longer willing to talk peace, why should we make any of these massive future payments to them? So you see, folks, within Donald Trump's tweets, what he's saying is that no, the Palestinians cannot have Jerusalem as their capital anymore. This is what he was inferring with this Twitter tweet. However, he is still trying to give most of East Jerusalem, with the exception of the Old City, to the Arabs, to the Palestinians in this ultimate peace deal. And the Palestinians will have to have their capital in, what is that place called? Abu Dis, which is east of East Jerusalem. Now, I don't see how Benjamin Netanyahu can agree to this, but this is very troublesome, and this ultimate peace plan unveiled on May the 14th, the day that the United States puts their embassy in Jerusalem, could start a war. Which is why I keep saying, look out for the middle of May. Please, everyone, watch for the middle of May. And remember this, that the first fruits of many came on Shavuot. That's right, his birthday is on Shavuot, when he arrived to come and save Israel. And I have no doubt that the Messianic era will begin on the same day. Is it going to be this year? I don't know. But every year, everyone should watch Shavuot, Feast of the First Fruits. Every year, everyone should also watch Hanukkah. I will finish this with one scripture from Paul. Second Thessalonians 5 and verse 3. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 3. Starting in verse 1, but of the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of Jehovah's wrath so comes as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then shall sudden destruction come upon them like travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as a thief. Which means you should be paying attention. You should know when it's about to happen. You should know. This is not rocket science, folks. This is about paying attention. Verse 5, you are the children of light and the children of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober, for they that sleep, sleep in the night. And they... Did I miss something? But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet the hope of salvation. For Jehovah has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by our Master Yeshua Messiah, who died for us. Whether we be asleep or awake, we should live together with him. So peace and safety. Now, we got somebody claiming to have the ultimate peace deal. And you know as well as I do, nobody is going to be happy with this peace deal. But especially not the fake Stinians. And anyone who messes with Jerusalem will be cut to pieces. I said this was going to be my last passage, but all right. All right. I will first go to Matthew 21 to 21 verse 44. Oh boy. Matthew 21 verse 44. Now, I'll go to verse 42. Starting verse 4. Yeshua said unto them, Did you never read the scripture? The stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner. This is Jehovah's doings, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I say unto you, the kingdom of Jehovah shall be taken from you, that's that generation, and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken. But on whomsoever it shall fall, I will grind him to powder. Who is that stone going to fall upon? Is it Daniel 7 or is it Daniel 2? I believe it's Daniel 2. Is it Daniel 2? Yes. All right. Daniel 2, verse 31. You, O king, saw and beheld a great image, and this great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was fine gold, his breast and arms of silver. The fine gold was the Babylonian Empire, the silver was the Medo-Persian Empire, and his belly and thighs of brass, that was the Grecian Empire, and his legs of iron and feet part of iron and part of clay. The legs of iron was the Roman Empire, and the 10 toes, Europe, part of iron, part of clay, which has now just taken place. Okay? Verse 34, you saw till a stone was cut out without hands, which the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broke into pieces together and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So, the stone being Jerusalem, but the headstone being Yeshua Messiah, is going to fall upon the 10 toes, and all of the whole image, the Gentile kingdoms, will come crashing to the ground and be ground into fine powder. So what was Yeshua talking about again? Let's go back to verse 44. It says, and whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken. That generation in Jerusalem fell upon him and killed him, and they were broken. However, it says, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. So what we see here is the punishment on the Gentiles is going to be far worse than the punishment on Jerusalem. And do not forget that he is the chief cornerstone of Zion. And the nation that brings forth the fruits is going to be Israel when Yeshua Messiah washes them with the blood of the Lamb. Now, let us go to the prophets and get some further instruction here. Hopefully I have enough juice. Zechariah 12, verse 3, and I'll stop after that. In that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people, and everyone that burdens themselves with it shall be cut to pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. And it's a shame that the President of the United States has demanded parts of Jerusalem be given to, if this is true, if this on Debka Weekly is true, we will find out for sure. But anyone who divvies out, portions out Jerusalem to the Gentiles, to the Arabs, need to read Zechariah 12, verse 3 and see your judgment.